Dornbrand, Rebecca Salzman, Robert Rayborn, Danielle Winterman, and Sanjiv Handa.
In any order, you heard your name?
Hi, my name is Danielle Winterman. I live in Rockridge and I walk a lot, and I walk specifically past that corner, that area a lot. And I think that walking past gigantic buildings is awful. I think most people think this. That's why I rarely walk to the Safeway up the hill, even though I can walk there as easily as I can walk to the one down the hill. I don't walk in Emeryville because it's awful. The buildings are these just horrible to walk next to. And most people feel this way, which is why they expect to bring their cars to these buildings that they are awful to walk around. So obviously, the traffic in these areas just has to increase because nobody wants to walk around them because they're terrible. So that's one thing I wanted to say. Obviously, the traffic is going to increase. Secondly, Safeway keeps on telling us that this fits in with our community aesthetics and our desires and our needs. And Safeway is useful because it's open all night, but that means that the traffic and everything else is also there all night. And secondly, I wouldn't trust Safeway to tell me that it's going to fit my needs because they don't even sell lamb there. So I don't know. I don't know. It doesn't work that well if you're trying to make lamb meatballs past midnight. Okay, thanks.
Thank you. Good evening, Commissioners. My name is Robert Rayborn. I'm the Executive Director of the East Bay Bicycle Coalition. I come before you tonight to ask that you fully consider the adopted bicycle and pedestrian plans that in the city of Oakland. As well, you should fully address the traffic impacts on bicycle safety. The intersection of Claremont and College is ground zero. That's a horrible intersection that will get even worse without improvements in the future. And we can't envision an easy way to make improvements where there's already too much traffic. I want to remind you that there are precedents for fully including in the EIR the plans as well as the traffic impacts on bicyclists. You did so in your Trader Joe's analysis. As well, I want to remind you that CEQA is being reformed right now, and by January 1st, there will be new CEQA transportation guidelines that, well, it looks like from all the drafts we've seen, they will require that bicycle pedestrian plans and transit use be fully considered in environmental impact reports. I can share that Safeway has been, can be applauded for putting in bike racks adjacent to the front doors. However, those came about through a tenacious effort on part of advocates, and it will take an environmental review to make certain that things are done right. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Hi, my name is Rebecca Salzman, and I live in the neighborhood just a few blocks away. And I agree with the need to look into the bicycle and pedestrian issues, but also to keep in mind how terrible the current store is for pedestrians. That area is really bad. I primarily am a pedestrian and a bus rider, and I always feel unsafe in that area with all the curb cuts, so I think things like getting rid of curb cuts are a very good idea. The other thing to keep in mind in terms of pedestrians, some of the speakers tonight have talked about how the Pleasant Valley Safeway is so close, it's a mile away. But for me, a mile away uphill and then back downhill with groceries doesn't make sense. So I don't have this as a satellite store. This is my store, and all the pedestrians in the neighborhood, which there are many of, they don't think about it in terms of a satellite store. And I would use this Safeway a lot more and buy more groceries there if they had more groceries to buy. Right now I go in there, I want to get out of there as quickly as I can because it's small and congested and they don't have very much there. In terms of buses and the bus traffic, people are talking about the 51 and how difficult it is right now. I actually just came from the AC Transit meeting, and they are in the process right now of updating the 51 line. They're gonna cut it in half and do a lot of other improvements, and it's one of their top priorities right now. So that's something to keep in mind in this study. And the one last thing I wanted to talk about was I was just in San Diego, and there was a Ralph's grocery store that had a very similar design to this new Safeway design, with the parking lot underneath and right on the street was very accessible to pedestrians, and I thought it was just a great design. So I think a design like that can be really helpful for pedestrians. Thank you.
Thank you. Would you call the, are there, Mr. Handa, where you speaking?
I guess the last couple left. For the record, I'm Sanjiv Handa, East Bay News Service. Another bit of trivia, when I first moved to Oakland in 1966, the first apartment I lived in was directly across the street from the Safeway, what is now the Long Line Veggie House. It used to be K Cleaners, and there are 2 apartments upstairs that are now offices. So I had a bird's eye view watching this for a number of years develop. There are several points that came up, and I want to run down a quick list. The Conley Consulting Study was actually the second one that was done. And our city council, being what it is, never made the connection to the first one, which also was several $100,000. It was done under the auspices of the Oakland Sharing Division. And they actually had some different conclusions, but it would have been helpful to have the two side by side. Safeway in the 1970s consolidated. As you know, there were about a dozen abandoned or closed or reused Safeways, small ones, those brick front buildings on Claremont up near, one of them's now actually the post office up by Ashby, there are a couple others like that. And their intent at that point was, as the car was becoming more into usage, they found out people would drive a little bit further. Oakland has basically a congestion management plan that is from the 1970s. It is antiquated. All you have to do is go out on the streets of Oakland and you will find trucks and even cars double parked and triple parked, sometimes for hours at a time. The drivers from FedEx and UPS park here on Clay Street in the middle of the street, and they go have lunch or have coffee, and the city of Oakland can do nothing about it. It's a similar issue with the Safeway, where what you have is there are 2 loading docks proposed, but those would be primarily for the Safeway trucks, the semis that are coming in. The bulk of the deliveries, which include things like the daily bread delivery, a number of other kinds of purveyors, the potato chips, all of those are done by trucks that are basically delivered, and those come through the front door generally. And often there's congestion that is resulting on the streets as a result of those trucks parking directly in front, because the driver doesn't want to go a long way to do the delivery. So that's an issue. And then the final thing, I'll have to send the rest in writing, is just to note that in the context of the environmental impact report, the proposed service cuts by AC Transit, as well as the idling of ambulances, Oakland Fire Department trucks, and the delivery trucks, often for 30 to 60 minutes at a time, should also be taken into account, and there should be some documentation of that. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Honda. At this time, we're bringing it back to commission. Oh, I'm sorry. I think we agreed that the applicant would